Like countless others, my life and the life of my wife and my family was transformed through our interaction with Rav Yitzchok Berkovits. Then when I was a younger man in Eretz Yisrael, I had the zechus to daven at his shul in Sanhedrin Mechevet and to hear lectures from him as a part of Ner L'Alef's program, and eventually to be part of the Linas HaTzedek Kollel. I'd never let an opportunity go by without taking advantage of being able to learn from Rabbi Berkovits. He's Rorshiva Veish HaTorah, a tremendous Makarev, a tremendous Talmid Chacham, and somebody who has created many Rabbanim, Makarvim, and leaders throughout Klal Yisrael through his Kollel, the Jerusalem Kollel. It is my covet to introduce Rav Yitzchok Berkovits Shlita.
Bershus Chavrei HaMe'etzes, B'chazdei Hashem, I've been living in Yerushalayim for almost a half a century. But I grew up in Pirchei of 10th Avenue in Borough Park, in the Camp Aguda of Zisha Heschel and Rav Simcha Kaufman, Mibadal L'chaim Haruchim. There's something special about the Aguda of America. So let me tell you, my family has its roots in the Aguda. My father, Harini Kaparos Mishkovoi, was instrumental in establishing the Aguda right after the war in Romania, where many Platim were. He served as the head of the Tzirei. My ancestors were on the Moetzes. But on the other side of the family, my mother's father, who was the one grandparent I had the zchus of actually meeting, he was a Munkacher Kanoi. He came to America before the war, unsuccessfully trying to get the whole family out before the war. After the war, the Munkacher Rebbe parted ways with the Chassidim. So my Zayda compromised and became a Satmar. He remarried. His Rebbetzin couldn't take the climate in New York, and it was recommended they move to the West Coast. So he moved to Los Angeles. He couldn't find kosher food. He became a butcher to bring kosher meat to LA. And he often would come for slichis all the way till Erev Yom Kippur to New York to be with the Rebbe. He sat in Mizrach and Satmar. I remember his fiery drushes in our house about how in Eretz Yisrael, Malaikin and Bafshefer, they deny the Creator. So one time he was staying with us, and he said he was going to have a private meeting. He didn't want any one of us home. So we all went down to the basement. But to get into the building, you would buzz and someone would go upstairs and open the door. Someone buzzed, I went up, and who's standing there? None other than Rav Henoch Cohen, executive director of Chinuch Atzmai. Now, Chinuch Atzmai to Satmar was Avi Avoy Satuma. Chadorim and Beis Yaakovs in Eretz Yisrael that also teach Limudei Chol. No, after the all clear, when we were allowed back in the house, I went over to my Zayda and I said, every kid in Borough Park knows who that was. So after the Pach, he tells me, what, do you think I can raise money for Satmar in Los Angeles? You see, times have changed. I remember the days when my great uncle from my father's side, who started off in the Mohetzes in Europe, later in life became the Gaivid of the Eidach Chreidis in Yerushalayim. This was the Minchas Yitzchak, Zechron Levracha. I remember his relationship with other manhigim, the love, the respect. He openly He openly referred to Rav Shach as the Godel Ador. I remember how he referred to Rav Moshe, to Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky. It's a different world. People understood. There are vikuchim. But we're on the same side, fighting for the world of Torah, where Torah is not merely the supreme value, but the only value. The world has changed a lot. Lahavdil, the secular world, no longer debates, no longer argues. If you disagree with me, you just don't exist. A delegitimization of anyone that doesn't believe the way you do. The world is different. And we have to make sure that that doesn't rub off on us. And looking at the Agudas Yisrael of America, from Eretz Yisrael, I tell you, the fact that you're Aguda Achas, the fact that you're there together, fighting for the needs of Torah Jewry in America, is so impressive. Don't take it for granted. Cherish it and do everything you can to preserve it. Sure, as we get deeper into Ikvus de Mashiach, times get more and more confusing. And it's more and more difficult to understand what would Avosenu v'Avos Avosenu have done. And of course, there are going to be different days. But to work together. Leftist liberalism is taking over America. The Aguda, everyone in Aguda is there for all of American Jewry to ensure that it will be legal to practice as an Orthodox Jew in America. And if not, maybe recommend when it's time to start thinking about leaving. Sure, there are differences. And I'm sure there are those of you who are a bit bewildered, disappointed, would want everyone on the Ma'etzes and everyone within the Agudah to think the same. That would be too simple. The godless is Yasu Chulam Aguda Achas. There's no igud be'echad. It's getting together because there is one common goal. And that is caring for all of you and all of your children for their future. Whether your ancestry is from Chaleb, from Lezhensk, or from Kovna. To care for your well-being and your ruchnius and that of your children. And this achdus, this united effort, is something that once again I look up to and applaud. You know, these have been difficult times. Mysterious times. So much of what we take for granted was either questioned, changed, done away with. Working as a kehillah, chinuch, simchis. And the question is, in what way is a yid supposed to grow, not just persevere, but to grow from all of this? So I'd like to share with you what I communicated to my kehillah in Yerushalayim and to so many of the Anglos living in Eretz Yisrael. When all of the, call them institutions, where we get together, whether it's to daven together, to learn together, when all of those are one day in, one day out. When simchas, where we learn to care for one another and express our care for one another, are limited. Where do we have to turn? We very much have to turn inward and ask ourselves, how much of this has been superficial and we're missing really the neshama? Tefillah b'tzibur. Tefillah b'tzibur. Chazal give us all the milas of it. But the first underlying question is tefillah a service, or are you really talking to the Borei Olam? Are you really expressing your feelings? He wants to hear from us. Do you feel that you're talking to the Rabbeinu Shel Olam? In our Kehillah, Baruch Hashem, when we came back from lockdown, Psukei de Zimra was so much louder than it used to be. Shemona Esra took on the average at least an extra 5 minutes every tefillah. People learn to talk to Hashem. Of course, we missed the tzibur, the dvarim shebekdusha, the singing together. Sure, we missed all that. But there was nothing to hide behind. It was yourself and the Rabbeinu Shel Olam and nobody else. This is a time to reinforce that. And there have been korbanos. So many of our children are not what they were before COVID. We have to make sure that the house is one that radiates emunah, avas Hashem and avas Yisrael. And our children feel that simcha. You know, with the inconveniences, we may be spending a little bit too much time complaining or trying to work out the practicalities. A house, a home, a Yiddish home has to radiate emunah, emunah. You talk to Hashem every time you need help. Our mothers, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, every dish that went on, every cake that went in the oven when they had one, came with a tefillah. Everything you did, you knew you needed siyata d'shmaya, and that was the address. You spoke to the Rabbeinu Shel Olam. The home has to be filled with an awareness of the Rabbeinu Shem. He's really there. He's part of the family. Davening, you talk to him. And a love of the Rabbeinu Shel Olam. And a confidence that he loves us. The Haftarah of Pashas told us, the Masa to Malachi, Masa Dvar Hashem el Yisrael b'yad Malachi, Ahavti eschem amar Hashem. It's clear to me that if the Rishonim were dealing with our matzavim, they would have made the knowledge, the awareness that Hashem loves us as one of the Ikrei Ha'emunah. We have to know, and our children have to know, the Rabbeinu Shel Olam loves us and only loves us. And everything he does is for our good. They have to feel that. Our Avos Hashem and our Avos Torah. And although the Nefesh HaChaim tells us that when you learn, every brain cell should be dedicated to understanding the sugya and not thinking about dveikus, but he himself says that before you learn, and when you do take a break, and afterwards you remind yourself, it's the divine wisdom that you're ingesting in your brain. You're learning Chochmas Hashem, and the simcha of understanding it, and the transformation of the way you think is aligning your brain with Kavayochel, the way the Rabbeinu Shalom himself thinks. Milanu Godel, Reb Chaim Brisker, Reb Baruch Ber, look at their Svarim. There's Be'ezras Hashem Yisbarach all over the place. Feeling it's the Rabbeinu Shalom's turn. The simcha is a closeness to Hashem. And of course, an Avos Yisrael. Loving every Yid. Loving every single Yid. The Yidden that think like you and the Yidden that don't think like you. Leftist liberalism. It's led by our brothers. is led by Yidden. The place we think about them in Shmoneh Esrei should not be in V'lam al Shinim. It should be in Hashivenu, in Mekabe's Nidchei Amo Yisrael. We have to think about them. We have to think about their emunah. We have to daven to the Ribbono Shel Olam to open their hearts, for them to see reality as it is, especially today, when they're not even willing to argue with us, when secular education pretty much is not only devoid of religion, but devoid of a respect for it. There's little freedom of religion in the academic world. If you're a creationist, you're irrelevant. We have to feel for them. We have to be vocal. We have to be vocal about what we believe in. And for that to happen, we have to be real about what we believe in. Yeah, I think that would be my message to you. And once again, I salute the Agudah for being there for all of the Yidden who see Torah as the number one value. I want to add one more thing, and going back to that. Emunas Chachamim. Emunas Chachamim does not mean that every Talmid Chacham is infallible. It doesn't mean that no Talmid Chacham ever made a mistake. It doesn't mean that no Gadol B'Torah ever made a mistake. But one thing is for sure. Emunas Chachamim is the trust that a Talmid Chacham doesn't speak nonsense. In the confusing days deep into Ikvis of the Mashiach, I'm sure there are many of you who've been a bit shocked and maybe even cynical by what some of your own leaders have said. Many of you have written different Rabbanim off as irrelevant. If you think that a manik, a Rav, if you think he's talking nonsense, you obviously haven't understood it. You obviously haven't heard what he has to say. You obviously don't have a clue as to where he's coming from. Disagreement is one thing. To say that it's nonsense, chas v'sholem. Chas v'sholem. In fact, you're not in any position to comment on it if you think it's nonsense, because you obviously didn't get it. You don't begin to understand what it is. The Ribbono Shel Olam should bring the days when I guess what Chazal called Nasa Torah, Shtei Torahs, Veina Sida, Lachzar Elat, Sheyavah ben David, that the days of Ben David should come without confusion. Well, it will be Molor, it's Deus Hashem. But until then, the Agudis Yisrael of America should continue to be manhig, Torah true Jewry in America, and daiga for them and take care of their needs. All the different factions and all the different answers and all the different approaches to work together, to care for you and lead you all the way till you will go to welcome Mashiach Tzidkenu, and we'll all be there together in Eretz Yisrael, rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash, or watching it be rebuilt and brought down from heaven, and seeing the Ribbono Shel Olam's Torah with an absolute clarity, and all of humanity will know Hashem Elokei Yisrael Hu Melech. It is our Hashem that is the emes. Umalchusoi Bakol Mashallah. Thank you very much.